My guest today has won more than 2,300 races, including 2 Melbourne Cups and many other major races. Despite a couple of very serious injuries, no one has bettered his record of 97 Cup wins. Today, I'm with retired jockey John Letts. John, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's great to be here.
Thank you. The first question I've got to ask, your school teacher, Mr. Manning.
Yes.
Did he ever turn up to the races one day and said, "John, I told you should have been a jockey"?
No, Dan, it's something that in my life, as my career went on, for 29, 30 years, but there was a couple of things in my career and something that to me is like unfinished business.
Yeah.
Mr. Manning suggested that I become a jockey,
yeah,
because I'd been to 7 schools. I started at Brompton and I worked along the Port Road more or less because I didn't like school, I didn't like the teachers, and I didn't like the discipline. Yeah. But I never got into trouble, but I was unsettled and didn't know where I was going in my life. And Mr. Manning suggested I become a jockey. And I think, Dan, I was lucky because it was the last school I went to, Lefevre Tech. If a teacher had said it to me, say when I went to Findon or I went to Hendon or Gore Albalin, I mightn't have taken any notice. But I was just coming to the age of 14 where you leave, and I'd never been on a horse. And I thought, I might give it a try being a jockey, and it never occurred to me. I mean, I was in the Combined Cycle Speedway over at Findon, and I was taking my soapbox up to North Adelaide golf course every Sunday with my mate. Yeah. Something which I really would have loved to have done, I would have loved to have gone back, because from the time that he told me to become a jockey when I turned 14, within the next 13 years I'd won a Melbourne Cup. And I never ever got to thank him. I would have loved to. He died in the meantime, which was sad for me, because I thought, here's a guy that found a path for me. I mean, a lot of kids in the school, in the class, but he would have found, and teachers can pick a path for some of their students, and he picked that path for me, a jockey. But I never ever got the chance to go back and just walk in. Dan, the thing I would have loved to have done, I would have loved to have walked into the schoolroom after I'd won the Melbourne Cup in 72, and I would have loved to have walked in and just unannounced and just walked up and said, "Do you remember me?" And he might have said yes, he might have said no. And I said, "Well, I said, 13 years ago you told me to become a jockey." I said, "I've just won a Melbourne Cup." And but I never had the chance, which was sad for me. That was one thing, one of the things in my life that just leaves a little bit of a hole there, the one that set me on the track.
Yeah. Now, if you don't mind, the next question, my partner gave this to me this morning.
Okay.
She was on her way to work and she said, so I'll read this one out if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
From the time your school teacher, Mr. Manning, recommended you become a jockey, your wonderful career success choosing to ride Belldale Bull in the Melbourne Cup, your miraculous recovery from a broken neck, all seem to have a common thread: divine intervention. What are your thoughts on this point of view? Have you ever felt there has been something bigger than you guiding you?
I have. Yeah. It's a very, very interesting question too.
Yeah.
Because when I won the Adelaide Cup on Rain Lover, and I was promised to ride in the Melbourne Cup, and I lost the ride because he changed stables. And then within 5 days of the Melbourne Cup, that was 4 years prior to my winning the Melbourne Cup on Piping Lane, 5 days before the Melbourne Cup, which very rarely happens, I get a phone call from a Victorian trainer, a Tasmanian owner, and I'm in South Australia and had never ridden Flemington or been to the Melbourne Cup or anything, seen it on telly and that, but and I really feel someone looked down on me and said, "You might deserve this, or you're going to have a chance to do it." I took the ride on Piping Lane in the Melbourne Cup because the horse didn't have much form. Yeah. But I was a jockey that I wanted to have the feeling of sitting at the top of the straight of Flemington, 24 horses, jockeys from around the world, and I wanted to be able to, absorb that atmosphere with 100,000. There was 110,000 people in it. Right. And I'd never ridden in front of that crowd, crowd. I was unknown. Yeah. I think I went out on the track, Dan, and everyone clapped. Every other horse except number 16, which was me, because they didn't know me, they didn't know the horse. Yeah. So that was the reason. I think someone was really looking down on me, saying, "Give him a chance." Yeah. And then the second part, the question with the divine intervention. When I had the bad smash at Gawler and I had actually broken neck, I was told I'd never ride again. I was paraplegic. First of all, I was a quadriplegic. Then I was a paraplegic. I was going to be. So as the days went on in hospital, I started to get movement back. I was in hospital for 6 months in the Royal Adelaide in the spinal ward, and I came out, and this is where the divine intervention actually. I feel that it was that someone had looked after me. Someone was pointing at me. My neck was in a permanent fixture, and I couldn't turn my head at all. I had to turn my whole body. I couldn't drive a car, and I was never going to be able to ride a horse ever again. I was told that from the specialists. I went to Melbourne. I didn't want to go. A friend of mine rang me and said, "Come over," he said, "and do a bit of rehab over here," and said, "and relax." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to ride again." And I said, "No, I'm doing rehab here, but nothing's happening." I went to Melbourne. I was at the races. Now, I was still a licensed jockey, and I'm not allowed to be as a licensed jockey in the betting ring. But I was standing alongside the betting ring, and I was standing with my friend, and a guy ran past me. And he doesn't know it, even to this day, he doesn't know what he did. And when I was standing there, he hit my face, like with his shoulder. He's only a short guy, and it went crack. And it loosened it like it was a rusty bolt.
Yeah, right.
And I just turned my head, I fell to the ground, and my friend heard the noise, and he just picked me up. He said, "Are you all right?" And I the first time I turned my head in 6 months. And I'm sure that was, divine intervention. That was the second thing in my life that I found that someone had looked down on me. The third one was I went to Moonee Valley to ride a horse at Johnny Hawkes in the Cox Plate, and when I was there, I rode a horse for Colin Hayes. Now it actually trod on a hoof on a nail in the mounting yard, and 99 times out of 100 they scratched the horse.
Yeah.
This was before the Moonee Valley Cup. But the vet came over and he said to Colin, I said, "We'll have to scratch it." And Colin said, "Why don't we let John take her to the barrier, and if she's okay, run her. If she's not, scratch her." Well, 99 times out of 100, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So I went to the barrier, she was okay. So I rode her, and I was running third on the rail all the way and ran last. But there was a horse outside the leader, and I didn't know what it was, but it was in Robert Sangster's colours. And when I came in, I said to Colin Hayes, Colin said, "She didn't go too good." And I said, "No." I said, "What was that horse you had that sat outside the leader that ran fourth?" I said, "He got a bit tired in the straight." He said, "He's a horse called Beldale Ball." And I said, "Oh." I said, "Is he in the Melbourne Cup?" And I'd never heard of him.
Yeah.
And I was going to ride a horse called Love Bandit,
Okay.
who'd won the Sydney Cup. Now, you look at a Sydney Cup winner and you think, well, he's got to be a Melbourne Cup chance. But something told me, said, "This other horse I've never heard of." And I said, "What are you doing about the Melbourne Cup?" He said, "Why?" I said, "I'd like to ride him." He said, "You don't want to ride him." He said, "I've got a horse called Gay Trevo, it's much better than him." I said, "I want to ride him." I said, "I won't ride Gay Trevo." And he said, "Okay, I'll let you know. You let me know tomorrow morning." And so next morning, the press rang up and said, "What are you going to ride?" "Gay Trevo, Beldale Ball." I said, "Beldale Ball." And, it was someone looking down on me.
Yeah.
Gay Trevo was unplaced. Love Bandit ran third, and I won.
And you won it.
So someone was up there all that time looking down and saying, keep our eye on him.
As a young apprentice jockey, you rode your first winner, I believe, on a horse called Port Walk.
Yep,
You beat your idol by a half a length, Jim Johnson.
Jimmy, yep.
What influence did Jim Johnson have on your career?
He had, I suppose, one of the biggest influences anyone could have in a sport or a profession on someone else. Jim Johnson, who's still a great friend of mine, he's 92 years of age. He's a very humble man, a very close friend, and he's one of those guys that he doesn't expect anything in return, because I beat Jimmy that day at Snowtown, and I beat him half a length, and I looked across, it was my first day of riding, and I looked across and I beat him, and I thought, this is how much I think of Jim Johnson, even now. But then, he was my idol. And I looked across and I thought, I've beaten Jim Johnson. My first day of riding, my second ride in a race, and I beat Jim Johnson. I don't care if I never have another ride
Yeah.
in a race.
Yeah.
I've beaten my idol, and it was Jimmy Johnson. Of course, we remained friends we've been friends for the last 70 years, you know.
Yeah.
He's a great guy, and Jimmy is.
Yeah.
Great jockey, but a very humble man, but he's always there for me.
Due to your light weight as an apprentice jockey, the stewards wouldn't let you have a whip.
No.
How long did that last for? And secondly, do you think that helped you become a better jockey?
I don't know. The whip is something that a horse. We say about banning the whip or anything that, but the whip is just there like a reminder.
Yeah.
If a horse plays up and you've got no control over him, and you only got to give him a little slap, you don't have to hit him hard. Just let him know you got it, and or her, and they respond.
Yeah.
I had it, and they told me I had it. I could wear. I had to ride the country, and I wasn't allowed to have a whip or spurs for 12 months.
Oh, okay.
So I asked the stewards. I said, "Well, can I just carry the whip?" You know, and they said, "No, if you don't abide by the restriction we put on you, you don't get your licence." So I said, "Okay, that's fair enough," because I was only 4 stone 5,
Yeah.
and I said, "Well, why can't I, have the whip?" And they said, "Well, put yourself in our position." They said, "You turn for home and you're in front on a horse, and you've got the whip in your hand. We've let you carry it." He said, "You pull the whip to hit the horse with the whip, and at your weight, 4 stone 5, the wind will get you. You'll be on the horse behind you." Well, what could I argue? I couldn't argue, and I said, "Well, fair enough." But after about 6 months or so, and I was handling the horses okay, they said, "But my light weight made it so that they wanted both hands on the reins."
Yeah.
That's what they wanted.
Safety,
Because my first ride in a race, the horse had 8 stone 10,
Oh, okay.
and I was 4 stone 5. I was exactly half the weight the horse had. And so the stewards had to actually put the saddle and all the stuff on the scales, and I just stood on it. Usually you carry it, and I just stood on the scales and they put all the stuff on there. But I couldn't even carry it out to the horse.
You won your first Adelaide Cup on Rain Lover.
Yes,
I believe you had to waste pretty hard.
very
that
hard,
race, yeah.
very hard.
Did you find that challenging? And what did you do? What things did you do to lose the weight? Like, can you tell us a bit of insight into that?
Yeah, well, we used to have and you could still get stuff like appetite suppressant, which
Right.
Stop your eating.
Yeah.
Wasting for a jockey and losing weight is a mind game. It's more of a mind game. It's a physical strain and a mental strain as well. But I couldn't eat from if I was riding Saturdays, like I was riding Saturday, and Rain Lover had 7 stone 3. Now I was my riding weight was about 7 stone 6, 7 stone 7, and I had to lose 3 or 4 pounds. And so what I did, I went on a crash diet, and I'd start off at Glenelg and I'd ride to Port Adelaide with a couple of garbage bags with the head cut out and that and all, and, helmets and hats, and I'd ride down there and I'd ride back, and when I'd get home I would actually be on my bike and I would get off the bike and I would crawl into the bathroom because I was really dehydrated.
Yeah.
And you had to be careful if you dehydrate overweight too much. We had appetite suppressors to stop us eating. My mother was always worried about me with my wasting and not eating, and Mum would always say to me, "Well, look, just have a piece of lettuce and a tomato." She said, "They're not very heavy." And I said, "Mum," I said, a pound of lettuce weighs as much as a pound of feathers." I said, "And even if I eat a pound of feathers, it's still going to be the same pound." And she said, "Oh yeah," but she was worried. The jockeys, we had to do it pretty tough. Nowadays, we went from a 7 stone 3 in the Melbourne Cup. They were weighing some of the horses at 6 stone 10, which is about, I don't even know the conversion rate, but our minimum weight was about 45 kilos.
Yeah.
Now it's 53, 55. So they have got, they've got another 10 kilos that they can have. If we'd have had that luxury, I mean, a lot of jockeys would have stayed on longer.
Yeah.
I was in an era where we had to do it very, very hard, and unfortunately a couple of my friends died, from overweighting and sitting in the sauna. We'd sit in the sauna, we'd go in a sauna, and we wouldn't sit in there for 20 minutes or half an hour just to sweat. We would have to sit in there for 2 hours.
Yeah, right.
And it was hard, it was tough. I was talking about the mind games.
Yeah.
We could walk into a sauna and there was special spots in the sauna at the sports clubs, and if you sat in your spot, you could perspire and sweat. But if you sat somewhere else, your mind didn't work the same. You couldn't sweat, and even though it was hot. But you had to sit in your spot, and it was just like a mind game. And unfortunately, a couple of my friends actually died there, and it's but not through that, but because of wasting so hard getting their weight off. And of course, in Saturday night, it all goes back on again. But that's when the mind game comes in again. It's got to come off again. So it was a continual mind game, continually.
You knocked back a lucrative offer to ride in Singapore, I believe.
That's right,
You
yes.
decided to stay in Adelaide.
Yep.
You were riding for Bart Cummings at the time.
That's right.
What was your relationship like with Bart, and can you give us some insight into the man?
My relationship with Bart was terrific. I had a terrific relationship with Bart, and I think if you read his book, he said he's the only jockey that I couldn't understand and control. And it wasn't like a matter of controlling me. It was that we got on so well together. When I was offered that lucrative retainer in Singapore, I went to Bart for advice. I said to Bart, well, what do you think, Bart? He said, don't go, you've got plenty of good horses for me to ride. And so I stayed, and which was the best thing I did. And I kept just riding all those years for Bart Cummings, Colin Hayes and Graham Agnew. But his advice was always good. Into the man, one-liners, magic. Magic. I used to marvel at Bart. I would go out some nights when he'd come down from Sydney or Melbourne, he'd come to Adelaide and we'd go out for dinner. And of course I was very friendly with his foreman, Reggie, and little Joey Acressa, who rode track work, and some of the stories they can tell you. You marvel at the man because he won the Melbourne Cup with Viewed. Now Viewed was won by about half an inch, and Bart was back about 150 metres from the, and this was Bart's, I think his 12th Melbourne Cup, and Joey and Reggie Fleming were sitting alongside him, and Bart's very relaxed, very, very relaxed, and he was sitting there, and as they went over the line, it was half inch, and Greg Miles said, I don't know, he said, it's close to a dead heat, but I might lean, but it was only half an inch, and nobody really knew. And when the number went up, and Bart, actually Reggie and Joey said, oh boss, great, we've won our 12th Melbourne Cup. And Bart said, it's good, isn't it? and when they went down the stairs, I had to laugh because Joey said, I was walking down with Bart and the photographer ran up to him and said, Bart, let me get your photo. He said, stand on the stairs, I want to get your photo. And Bart said to him, no. He said, I'll get one in the paper in the morning for nothing. But that was him. And you know the story about the flies?
No.
Well, the inspector, the health inspector, went around to Bart's around here at Russell Street, and he said to Bart, because they had the manure pits around there, and they actually said to Bart, the inspector said, oh, Mr. Cummings, look, I'm the health inspector. He said, and we've had a complaint. He said, you've got too many flies around the place. And Bart said, well, how many can I have? But this was the man. This was the man. And what a lot of people don't know about him, too, Dan, is he was a genius. He came here one day, and we were walking along and we were looking at the horses, and he hadn't seen any of these horses because he'd been in Sydney and met about 20 horses at the track. And he looked at a horse in the corner. He said, what's that? I said, oh, it's such. He said, he won't win a race, that horse, I said, why? He said, he's got ulcers. I said, Bart, you give us ulcers. And I said, I don't know about horses, but it proved when he got Rogan Josh, he won a Melbourne Cup with him a few years later, but he found out he had ulcers. And he actually treated him for ulcers. And it had never been heard of, ulcers in horses. And Bart, he looked into the horse's eyes. He used to be able to, I don't know, he just had the gift, He was, we were in Melbourne, and I said to Bart, we were at a function, and I said, everything going good, Bart? He said, yeah, just getting the place painted. I said, oh, what? Saintly Lodge at Flemington. He said, yeah. I said, what colour are you going to have it? I thought he'd say, oh, I'll have my green and gold colours, you know. He said, no, I'm getting all the stables inside painted. I said, what colour? He said, same colour as the ocean, light blue. And I said, why is that? He said, he said, we get a lot of flies around the stables. I said, yes. And I thought, now what's coming next? And he said, flies never land on water.
Oh,
the
okay.
colour of the ocean.
Ah,
And you know, there never a fly went back in that place.
yeah, right. You're a deep thinker.
It was, he had it, and he brought in the idea of feeding a horse with a mirror the other side of its feeder, so that if it didn't eat much, it would always look there and see another horse,
Oh,
and it would be more or less, I want more than you.
yeah.
A lot of trainers tried it, but it didn't work. But I said to Bart, how come you get, your horses will do that? Because I'd seen them when I was going to eat there. He said, there's a little trick to it, you know. He said, you actually rub a flannel or a bit of towel or a bit of rag and put it on the mirror.
Oh, okay.
He said, and that horse there smells that horse there.
Oh.
He said, that's the connection.
Okay.
He never ever told anyone. I never told anyone because he trusted me with it. But when you think of him, the things that
Yeah.
he did with horses, and just, there'll never be another one like him. And there'll never be another thinker like him, because he was always in thought, you know, deep in thought. And you never argued with him. And I mean, I could argue with him, but he would always say, oh, well, what we'll do, we'll try it my way, and if it doesn't work, I'll take the blame. This is in different riding tactics. And he said, and if it works, he said, I'll take the praise.
Yeah, the
He
praise,
said.
yeah.
So, but you had to always, but I got on terrific with Bart. He was, to me, he was he was the greatest. He was the greatest.
Yeah. You once said Sir Gogolo was a complete racehorse. What led you to believe that?
Sir Gollio?
Oh, Sir Gollio.
Yeah,
sorry.
Sir Gollio, yeah. Well, actually, what happened with him, Dan, he walked into the stables one day at Graham Hegney's,
Yep.
and he came in, and he got off the float, and he was only a 2-year-old, and he came off, and he had a sway back, he had a U-neck, he had a dish face, the cattle had chewed his tail off, and he walked like Charlie Chaplin.
Okay, yeah.
And I was there when he got off the float this day, and I was at Graham Hegney's, and I said to Graham, what's that? When we seen it, he said, it's a horse. I said, you've got a job ahead of you here.
Yeah.
And you know, even though I won I think 20 races on him,
All right,
but
yeah.
every time I went out on him, he performed.
Yeah.
I rode him in, I think he had I didn't ride him in the 100 races, but he had 100 races. But he never ever went out in a race and never tried. He tried his hardest. The laziest horse you'd ever see or have anything to do with. He would go to sleep at the track. You'd have to wake him up to take him out on the track. One day at Cheltenham, I rode him in a race there at 1,400 metres, and we used to have to go in our barrier numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in that order. And so he had to go in early. Well, we were standing in the gate there at 1,400 at Cheltenham. There was one horse I thought I had to beat, and I had to beat him out the gate, the other horse. And I was just sitting there, and when the gates opened, he just fell out the front. He was asleep. And I fell off the side. So he ran back that way. I stood here. So that was him. But he was my favourite. And a lovely horse, and the people, the Fargers, that they're still involved in racing because they make Steriline race gates, the barrier stalls. But he was my old favourite. Like Banjo was my favourite, you know, in Melbourne as far as interviews. But as a racehorse, Sir Gollio was just, he was number one, always will be.
Recently there's been a lot of debate about the whip rules. Do you think the whip will eventually be banned?
I don't think they'll ever be able to ban it, Dan, because it's just a reminder. It's like it's just something that if they do something wrong, they can just slap them. They don't have to hit them. They don't have to hit them. My biggest problem in accepting this about the whip rule is that I think that they've taken the power away from the stewards a lot. Because if you were excessive use of the whip, the stewards would fine you anyway. But then some people have come along, or they've got advice, and I don't know where they got it from, but I don't know whether they got advice, and it wouldn't have been from people that rode in races. I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
But you have a look at a lot of jockeys. Now, we've got some great jockeys in Australia, and you have a look at the moment, Jamie Carr.
Yeah.
Hardly uses whip, but when she does, it's a necessity.
Yeah.
So that's, a jockey uses a whip when it's necessary. I mean, I hate to see horses that are not being competitive in the race, who's got no chance with a jockey hitting him. But that's all gone.
Yeah.
Because nowadays it's a fine or a suspension. So all of that's gone. If you are there competing, it's okay, because I mean, I think it's only, and the whips that they use nowadays, honestly, they are like a feather duster. A thought that often comes through my mind is, you know, we had, at the harness racing, we had what they called a pad across their rump, and it was like a rubber, you know, air in it, and they, if they hit with the whip, and their whips are only long, flexible, but it would make a noise, but the horse didn't even feel it.
Yeah.
But they banned them.
Yeah, right.
They banned them. They banned them in South Australia, and they banned them everywhere. And they, I think, were one of the greatest things that come in. Now, with the racing side of it, I mean, we're only allowed to hit behind the saddle, and we've got a saddle cloth number down there. Now, those saddle cloth numbers are pretty big. Why not make them out of a material that's very light,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
doesn't, but they don't hurt the horse anyway, and a lot of jockeys don't revert to the whip anyway because they know the rules. Sometimes they break the rules, but I can understand the jockey breaking the rules and being fined for excessive use of the whip, and I mean more hits than he should have. They mightn't have been harder than the others, or mightn't have been as hard as the others. But if you're in a tight finish, and your owner and your trainer and the punters, they all expect you to do your best to win.
Yeah.
And if you was to line up nearly every jockey in Australia, I don't think you'd find a jockey there that you could say it's cruel to the animal, because we love them.
Yeah.
We love them. They're our life, and we have to look after them.
Sure. Well, John, congratulations on a memorable career, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Dan. It's been interesting. There's a lot
you.
of stories, and
Yeah.
if we had more time, we could really go through a lot of them. A lot of them. There's a lot of sad ones, a lot of funny ones, and you know, great stories, wonderful memories, wonderful memories.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.